Hi, this is Pastor Walker. Welcome to Faith Boost. We are looking at a topic called Run to Win, and it comes from a text that Paul gave as an admonition to the church in Corinth. And so let's read this. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and starting in verse 24. It says, "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus," or like this, "not with uncertainty. Thus I fight not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and I bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should be disqualified." So Paul talks about an athletic competition, and the readers at that time would have understood like what we have today, a 5K or a marathon. And so there were people that would train for these competitions, and you and I know, obviously, there's only one team that wins the World Cup. There's only one winner of a marathon. And so we are not running against each other, but we are running a race that God has set before us. We'll see in Hebrews. And we run for something. There's a motivation. And Paul was saying that people in the natural, they discipline their body. They are up in the morning. I remember hearing who I consider the greatest boxer of my lifetime, Mike Tyson. And they asked him one time, why do you get up at 4 a.m. to run on the road? He said, "Because my opponent gets up at 4:30. Meaning I've got to beat him. I've got to have one up on him. And so they did this for a crown that is perishable. It rusts. Somebody else gets the cup the next year. So if they can have such dedication for something that's temporal, Paul is saying to us believers, we're in a race that has eternal consequences, an imperishable crown. So if they have such dedication, we should have more dedication. And he said that he disciplines his body, and he says, so that I'm not disqualified. Probably many of you watch football, and to be disqualified from a football match is the dreaded red card, meaning you can't be on the pitch anymore. Regardless of how good you are, your contributions will no longer be felt. And so Paul is saying that in the race that he had, that he could receive a red card. Not that he's going to die and go to hell, but that his talent, his gifts, and his ability will no longer be making contributions. And so he didn't want that to happen. So he lived his life in a purposeful way so that would not happen. So we have this exhortation, but let's go over to Hebrews chapter 12, because there's actually a wonderful strategy for runners, for people who are competing. And it's a wonderful parallel passage. So Hebrews 11, the author of Hebrews is using all of these examples of men and of women in the Old Testament who did something by faith. Abraham, Sarah, Noah, David, and he said, and many, many others that I don't have time to even put here. So these were stories and people they were familiar with. And so it wasn't a history lesson. Hebrews 12 tells us it's for us. Hebrews 12 says, therefore we also. So all these people who made faith decisions and faith actions, we are in that list. So we also, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, these people who are finished their race and now they're cheering us on, let us do two things. Lay aside every weight and the sin. So lay aside the weight and the sin. And then he describes this sin. So it would be okay to just say lay aside sin, but he says lay aside the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. So when you watch the Olympics or the Diamond Series athletics, none of those people are running with the same attire that in the Winter Olympics a downhill skier has on, a huge helmet, a parka, pants that are going to keep you dry and warm. No. They're wearing almost nothing. And so they strip aside anything that would hold them back or hinder them from running. So it's not about just what I'm wearing, it's the purpose for my race. And so I'm not going to let anything get in the way. So lay it aside, strip it off. Okay, so let's think about those two things. All right, so a weight is not a sin. Okay, a sin is something, we'll start with the second one there. A sin is something that God defines as sinful. It's something from his word. And so for us New Testament believers, we have the list in Ephesians and Colossians of lay aside things that are wrong, gossip and sexual immorality, and things that we might consider to be big deals and some that we might consider to be small things. But they're sin because God says they are. Okay, so they're defined by God as missing the mark, things that don't glorify him, things that hurt other people, that are different than his nature. So it's talked about lay aside lying. Well, God's not a liar. So if we are involved in activity that is the opposite of God's character, the Bible typically calls that a sin. So a sin, and then it says the sin that so easily ensnares us. The Bible speaks of holiness, right living, and sinful living, both in the New Testament and the Old Testament, refers to them at times as paths, as ways in which we walk. And all over Zambia, there are paths. At my house, there are paths where people walk to go to certain places, and you walk on it long enough, and it gets worn, doesn't it? Here at Miracle Life, we have sidewalks, but sometimes people say, I need to get there. And over time, you'll see that there might be a path that is formed. So the sin that so easily ensnares us, in a sense, is a pathway that we have formed in our hearts and in our lives. And all of us that are Christians that are watching this, there are certain sins that are not pathways in our life. We haven't partaken in them. We don't understand. There's certain sins that we kind of scratch our head when someone else does that, typically because we're like, I don't understand what the pleasure would be about. I've never done that. But the Bible says that there are certain sins in our life that we're used to, the sin that so easily ensnares us. And so if you grew up as a young person and then became older and you kind of had a habit of lying, telling things that are untrue, and we tell lies typically for two reasons. One, we don't want the pain or the trouble that truth will get us, or we want a benefit that we really shouldn't have, but lying will get us a benefit. Okay? So if you're used to doing that, then lying might be the sin that so easily ensnares us. You know where the path is. You're used to it. You know how to do it, all right? And so the Bible says, it doesn't say to break a generational curse. It doesn't say that this will only come out by a 40-day fast. It says to lay it aside. So my reading glasses. So I have it, and so it's within my power to lay it aside. That is wonderfully empowering for you and I, that as a New Testament believer, we have the power to lay sin aside. So, meaning it's your responsibility. No one else is going to do it for you. Then it also says await. So await, and I believe the author of Hebrews mentions two things, because what that tells us is that a sin is different than a weight, meaning that a weight is not technically a sin. It's not on one of God's list. But a weight is something that slows you down. A weight is something that keeps you from running optimally. And I just want to look at a few that I think are weights that I've seen in my own life. I've seen in the lives of others, of people that I interact with. A weight might be the wrong type of person in your life. A person that slows you down. A person who takes and takes and takes and never gives. It is not a healthy relationship. Now, I'm not talking about your spouse. I'm not talking about, a sibling, someone, in your family that you have a responsibility toward. But, friends are the family that you pick, all right? And I hear people say this sometimes. Oh, well, no, I've known him since high school. So what? If that guy or that lady is a weight, it's not to treat them ugly, it's not to shun them, but it's to demote them 5 levels in your life, that I don't have to spend a lot of time with them, because their presence in my life is a weight. It is a burden. So people can be a weight. What else could be a weight? I find, we all have free time, and we all have stuff that we do when we're if you're a student, or if you are employed, or if you have certain responsibilities. But then we have hobbies. We have stuff that we do for fun. Don't pick a hobby that emotionally drains you, that you are not lifted up, that doesn't give you life and energy. Okay, certainly don't let the pub be a hobby for you. That doesn't add to your life. It takes away from your life. Okay, and if you go to the pub to the point of being drunk, then that would be a sin as well. Have hobbies that don't drain you. Another thing to be very, very careful about is your media consumption. And nowadays, we can consume media anywhere with a smartphone, with a laptop. And I enjoy news. I enjoy checking sports scores and those. But there's a lot of media and social media that it is created to annoy you. It's created to agitate you. Right now, at the time of this recording in Zambia, we're having lots of load shedding. It's not fun. It's a burden. It's a pain. So you could go down a rabbit hole for the next 6 hours of who's behind this, the Illuminati or another country. What former president or current president is, and read all the posts. And you know what all it does? It just agitates you. It just gets you upset. My friend, that is a weight. That is something that doesn't help you to obey God. It doesn't help you run your race. It doesn't help you making an investment with other people. Don't let media and stuff and endless disputes about nothing burden you and weigh you down. For some people, it's politics or stuff that surrounds politics of this or that, or the Ukraine, or Biden's son's laptop, and people just spend hours and days simply getting upset and agitated on something that has it doesn't make a difference in your life. So lay that aside. Don't let that be a weight. So why? Because we have a race to run. We're going to keep our eyes on Jesus. We're going to do his will. We're going to glorify him. And yet we have a responsibility to look at things that are sinful and also things that are weighing us down. And with the help of God and the grace of God to say, you know what? I'm laying it aside. I'm getting lighter. I'm getting leaner, and I'm going to run the race. Paul said this at the end of his life to Timothy. He said, I did it. I ran my race. I finished my course. He was aware of what it was, and he was aware that he was finished. And may we have that discernment and revelation and light for our lives as well. So thanks for being on Faith Boost. We love you. Have a great rest of the week, and we will see you at Miracle Life this Sunday. God bless. So glad you are part of this Faith Boost broadcast. What we'd ask you to do is go to YouTube and subscribe to the Miracle Life channel. On Facebook, like the Miracle Life Facebook page. That way you'll receive notification when there's new content. We've got content like this that's regularly coming out to bless you, to help you. Also notifications that will help you in your walk with God, what's happening at the church and things like that. And with notifications, it actually gets pushed to you, and it's a great way to be reminded. So go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, and go to the Facebook page and like it. God bless you.